more effective if you give in these congressional races because they're not as well funded. And so money is really important in some of these down ballot races that Barnacle and I stay up until, the wee hours of the night following, and especially in governor's or mayor's races. When you look at tonight in LA, Pratt has really made his own luck, and he did it using social media and not a lot of money. And it is proof that a little anger still drives American politics.
Jim, if Barnacle's telling you he stays up late to watch down-ballot races, he's lying to you. He's watching the A's Mariners in extra innings. That's why he's up late. Let's move to myth number 4, Jim, and I think this is a really important one. You're pushing back against some of the pessimism, even fatalism you hear among Democrats, which is that the Trump administration, Republicans now play so dirty, they're going to rig the election or steal the election or perhaps cancel the election in some places with some of the moves they've made. How do you fight against that thinking?
Yeah, it's a big one in the Democratic Party. After our second glass of Chardonnay, a whole bunch of Democrats want to say, oh, he's just going to steal it. And the fact is that's not true. We're looking to make sure this 2026 and 2028 are tamper-proof elections. And the way you do it is go back to Barnacle's local races. You win the Supreme Court races. You win the Attorney General's races. You make sure that the people who actually run the elections, and it's not federal, it is state elections, it is state people who run these elections, you make sure that they're going to run fair elections. And so I'm part of this Democracy Defenders PAC with super lawyer Norm Eisen. We're doing really good work across the country to make sure that the people that are actually running these elections are going to run them fair, and we're winning all over the place. So I do think we're going to have fair elections, even though Donald Trump's going to do everything he can to stop that.
So, Jim, with all this in mind, we've run through these 4 myths that you're trying to bust. Give our viewers, if you would, I know it's 5 months out, but just your view, because you have such good insight on this stuff, of what November might look like. There's obviously huge optimism given the state of the economy and some other tailwinds for Democrats that they'll win the House. I think at this point they'd be disappointed if they didn't. Some hopes, though more difficult, for the Senate as well. How do you see it going as we sit here this morning?
Well, look, I think a couple things. I do think we're the favorites to win the House. It is harder because of the redistricting stuff. Right now we have an 8-point lead in the generic ballot. That's about where we were in 2018. In 2018, we picked up 40 seats. That same map with this 8-point lead, Willie, would give us a 12-seat majority. So I think it's going to be closer than people think. I do think there's a shot, if an outside shot, in the Senate. But what's really interesting is in the states, especially the governor's races, which are incredibly important to the presidential and for who runs this country. I think Democrats are going to have a historically good night and win governor's races all over the country. It's a little bit easier for swing voters to vote both parties in non-federal races than it is in federal races. So I think it is shaping up to be a very good night, but Democrats just have to learn the lessons of the past. We're super good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. We proved that in 2024. And so we just got to double down and do whatever we can to make sure that we start to take some of these levers of power away from Donald Trump. It is the most important thing you could do as Democrats to win the House of Representatives.
Always listen to Jim Messina, a wise man. Jim, thanks so much again for getting up so early for us this morning. Jim's new piece available to read on Substack. Coming up, as a growing number of Americans express concern about the future of the country, our next guest says it should be up to CEOs to reinstate optimism. Co-founders of Axios, Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei joins us to explain that next. Morning Joe's coming right back.
Alone. That's not an insult to politicians. Most of the really good ones, they want help to figure things out. And we business kind of step back. That's what happened in Europe, where, the political leadership class became a permanent political leadership class. And I think it ended up being a mistake. So I do agree with that point that we should step forward and do things that are good for the country. Like John F. Kennedy said, don't ask what the country could do for you, ask what you could do for the country. And we've got to have a little bit more of that spirit.
That's J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon weighing in on the responsibility business leaders hold in today's society. Our next guests argue employers do play a big role in helping to fill an urgent leadership void in America. Joining us now, co-founders of Axios, Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei. Guys, welcome back. I have to tell you, your original piece on this, talking about the theory of the American moment, the rattled generation, was being rocketed all over the place yesterday. I got it from a few different people, sent it to people as well. So talk a little bit, Jim, first here about how you see CEOs kind of filling this moment, because I think most people think, I don't know, are they part of the problem? They're the rich guys and the rich women, and people are struggling to pay for their gas. So how do CEOs help to lead us out of the place we're in right now?
Yeah, Willie, you have a lot of viewers who like to email. Well, I got a ton of emails yesterday from that segment,
Yeah.
but the segment was about this idea that people are just rattled. They're looking for leadership. They're hungry for leadership. You see it, I'm sure, with your younger employees. We see it when we're speaking at college campuses. And when you look at the polls, nobody trusts anybody. It might be the biggest problem facing America right now. Nobody trusts anybody in positions of power except for their employer. Almost 80% of people, they have faith in their leaders, in their CEO. And most CEOs just want to run their business, and usually that's fine. But I think you have a leadership void out there that if it's not filled by someone, and I think CEOs are the ones to fill it right now as employers, we're going to be in trouble. People need to see moral leadership modeled. They need to get guidance through this AI transformation. They need to understand the principles that have made great people great throughout time, which is just working hard, putting a cause above yourself, like doing the right thing even when people aren't looking. And if you're not going to church, if you're not getting that at home, you're sure as hell not getting it on social media. And a lot of people feel like they're not getting it anywhere.
And Willie, what's super important here for your viewers is CEO here is a proxy for any leader. You can be a Little League coach. You can be leading two people, or like Jamie Dimon we saw leading 300,000 people. But if you have people in your life, and if you're watching Morning Joe, you are a leader. You're someone that people in your circle, even your friend group, turn to. You have an obligation. People are hungry to lead. And here's something that is true across American life, and that is take the local, close to home. We don't like Congress, but we often like our member. We don't like education, but we like our school. Poll after poll shows that people will listen to their employer. So what can you do? And Jim, we've got a few here.
No, I think there's a bunch of things that, no, go, please, Jonathan.
No, I was just going to say on this, what would you say to the pushback that would be that CEOs, a lot of Americans watching this might feel like your CEOs are out of touch. They don't care about some of the smaller employees. We see the rising compensation packages as a symbol of the remarkable income stratification we've seen. That's a lot of Americans are really angry at that. The haves, the have-nots. That's only accelerated. So what's the risk then of this class, the CEO class, being looked to lead when already so many people are suspicious of them?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no doubt there's a wealth gap, and it's a huge problem. And I think every company, you have a moral responsibility to make sure you take care of your people and that you compensate people fairly. If you do that, people perform a hell of a lot better. And most of the CEOs you see on TV, like, they're not representative of the literally tens or hundreds of thousands of CEOs out there. Most companies are small businesses. And like Mike said, a teacher is a leader. It's what do people in a position of power over anyone? It could be two people. It could be a parent. It could be anyone. But if you think about the things that trouble you right now about what's happening in society, it's this lack of values, this lack of trying to figure out, hey, how do we work together to solve a problem? The lack of putting competence over loudmouths. If you think about the fundamental problem with politics right now, it's like all the people we hear about, it's just this nasty language, it's all this fighting. That's not most people. Most people are like, oh my God, I'm living my life, I'm trying to solve a problem. And by the way, I think most people running businesses do that. To be honest, I think they're scared. They're so scared to speak out now because they worry about revolts internally or externally. I'd say get over it. You're blessed to be in a position of power. You have an obligation, and you might as well figure out ways to lead people, especially in the next couple of years. People are scared as hell of artificial intelligence, and it could go good or it could go bad. And if you want to know whether it's going to go in a good direction or a bad direction, the thing that will determine that is good leadership, good governmental leadership, good business leadership, good academic leadership. If you don't have those ingredients, this technology, like the last technology, and like anything, it will go off the rails.
So, Mike, based upon what Jim was just talking about, and based upon the concept of the rattle generation, you could work for the strongest company in the United States of America and feel very comfortable at work, very comfortable with your CEO. What do you do and what can be done about dealing with the thing called anxiety among employers. Anxiety about today, anxiety about AI, anxiety about their children's schools. I mean, that's a huge, huge issue, I would think, that's out there.
For sure, Mike, and you have young people in your life. And a point that we made in our Rattled Generation column was it's not their fault. It's very understandable given what the younger generation has lived through. So what can you do? One, the first thing that we suggest here is leveling with the people that you lead. Truth builds trust. And we know that people are hungry to lead. We're reminding you here that if you have a couple people in your life, you have an obligation to lead, and that can be that leveling with them makes a big difference, including on AI. In every workplace in America, this is the conversation. And if we as leaders understand it, are skilled in it, can show people that it's opportunity, can show people how to enhance their superpower, like that's going to make a big difference. One more quickly is rewarding competence, showing people that you're going to be demanding and tough, but you're going to be fair. And Jim talked earlier, modeling moral leadership. This isn't being preachy. This is showing grace. This is showing humility. This is showing courage, strength.
The new piece in this series has got a lot of people talking, available online now. Co-founders of Axios, Mike Allen, Jim Vandehei. Guys, great to see you both.
Thanks, guys.
Still ahead as President Trump reportedly abandons the so-called anti-weaponization fund. Our next guest says it ended under a shadow of corruption. Best-selling author, former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade joins us next with a look at her new book titled The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mobization Fund, the one sought by the president to compensate alleged victims of prosecutorial misconduct. It's something our next guest says should instead be named the Grifter Fund and stems from a lawsuit that, quote, ended under the shadow of corruption. Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney, MSNOW legal analyst, our friend Barbara McQuade. She's out today with a new book titled The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Barbara, congratulations on the book. It's always great to see you, especially when you're here with us. Let's talk about anti-weaponization first. That's what they're calling it anyway. Even Republicans raised the red flags on this one, which is a rare moment in Washington these days when President Trump has an idea and said, this is a bridge too far. Can you remind our viewers how this slush fund, as some people have called it, or you call it the Grifter Fund, even came about from this flimsy lawsuit against the IRS?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to believe because it's stranger than fiction. So Donald Trump files a lawsuit against his own IRS and Treasury Department as president. It's based on a leak of his tax returns and those of his sons and his business in 2019, which was wrong. And that person, who was a contractor, was not only dismissed from his job, but he was criminally prosecuted and sentenced to prison. Now Donald Trump wants damages, money back, asking for $10 billion, even though he wasn't able to trace any losses whatsoever to that. And so he decides to not only file the lawsuit, but to settle that lawsuit. And it only came after a judge began asking some very hard questions, and briefs were due 2 days later when the Trump administration decided to settle the case. The judge was asking questions about whether this was a genuine case or controversy over which a court has jurisdiction, which requires adversity between the parties. And since President Trump controls the IRS and the Treasury Department, that adversity appeared to be lacking. And so instead, a settlement was negotiated. He dismissed the case, allowing this $1.776 billion to be set aside, not for him, but for people who claim to have been harmed by the so-called weaponization of the Justice Department during the Biden administration. And the kicker, allowing him to be free of any audits from the IRS forever.
That was the key to him,
Yes.
that part of it, yes.
And that part seems to be staying.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the title of the book, The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Love to have you describe the ways in which this feels like a mob-style government, but also I was just saying to you, we've heard a lot about how bad things are in the country right now, and it's true, we report on it every day, but you offer solutions in this book for regular people, what they can do besides yelling at their TVs every day.
Yeah, we've done enough of that.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of the fix is sort of a double entendre, if you will. talking about, based on my experience as a federal prosecutor, seeing how corruption is done, how extortion is done, how fraud is done, and comparing it to the tactics of this administration, inflicting pain on other sources of power to coerce them to come to the table to negotiate their own punishment. We've seen President Trump do this with law firms, universities, the media, even foreign allies when tariffs were in effect. But we don't have to accept this as the status quo. There are many things we can do from a formal perspective with enactment of guardrails to improve the way our government operates, codifying some of the norms into laws, but also, as you mentioned, things we as citizens can do right now. Engaging in peaceful protest, for example, is incredibly powerful. Political scientist Erica Chenoweth at Harvard says that based on her research of hundreds of regimes, if only 3.5% of the population engages in peaceful protest, they can effect regime change. So lots of things we ourselves can do to take back the power of our democracy.
So, Barbara, as a former U.S. attorney, what's your reaction to the fact that today there are several U.S. attorneys around the country who don't believe the government lawyer in front of them in cases?
Yeah, I think it's a real shame at the Justice Department. In fact, it caused me a lot of pain as somebody who worked at the Justice Department for almost 20 years. We always enjoyed what was known as the presumption of regularity. I remember being told and then telling other younger lawyers that when you walk into court, you enjoy a credibility that you did not earn. You get to say your name appearing on behalf of the United States, and the judge will instantly believe everything you say. Don't blow it. You've built up this reservoir of trust is there that's been built up over generations of Department of Justice lawyers, and you carry that responsibility with you. But for good reason, I think we are seeing judges say, I don't have that presumption of regularity with you anymore, because we have seen too many examples of DOJ lawyers misleading courts or covering up things that are happening in the courts. And that is just not the way Justice Department lawyers are supposed to operate. We were always told Justice Department lawyers' job is not to win cases, but to see that justice is done.
So, Barbara, one of the lessons of the Trump era this past decade is so much of what the American government is based on are actually sort of norms and good faith agreements rather than things that are codified into law. In the book, in your book here, you suggest a few structural changes that could tighten things to prevent this from happening again. Give us a couple examples.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we could do is have Congress enact some standards for the people who occupy some of the cabinet positions. These were all created by acts of Congress. We already have some of these laws codified. For example, the Attorney General must be someone learned in the law. We could put some real requirements in cabinet official positions, and the president would have to choose somebody who meets those things. For example, if you're going to run the Department of Health and Human Services, maybe you ought to be a doctor, or at least somebody with knowledge in public health. If you're going to run the Defense Department, maybe you should have achieved certain levels of management experience in the Defense Department before you get a job like that. Over at the Justice Department, there are currently policies called the Principles of Federal Prosecution that prohibit partisan politics from infecting case decisions. There's something called the FBI Domestic Operations Guide that tells the FBI they may not begin an investigation based solely on First Amendment protected activity. We could codify that through the Federal Register in the Code of Federal Regulations so that those can't be dismissed with a wave of a hand as simple policy. There would have to be a notice and comment period to change those rules.
Barbara, it's, one of the things Joe talks about a lot on this show is that the day will come for a lot of the people who are either behaving in a corrupt fashion or a criminal fashion during this administration. They feel like they have effective immunity with President Trump at the top of the government right now. Are you confident that our justice system will hold people to account, not today or tomorrow, but down the road for some of the things we're seeing and some of the things you describe in this book?
I do, and I think accountability is really important. You know, I look at some of the lessons of history. One is Nuremberg. Those trials were essential for helping the public understand what really happened in Nazi Germany. In contrast, I think Watergate was an example of hearings that educated the public, but a failure to hold a president accountable in a way that maybe opened the floodgates for what we're seeing today. Now, it may be that President Trump gives pardons to everybody on their way out the door, but there are other ways of holding people accountable. Certainly state governments have some options in bringing criminal cases, and there's no ability to pardon them from those kinds of cases. And also with respect to the people who are lawyers, there are bar grievances that could take away their license to practice law, their livelihood. And I think that is a way of holding people accountable.
There's a lot in here. Come back and talk more about it. We always love having you here. The new book is The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Barbara McQuaid. Barb, thanks so much.
Thanks, Billy.
As we hit the top of the hour here, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, some of the stories we are following this morning. President Trump says Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to scale back attacks after he spoke yesterday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and mediators connected to the terrorist organization. It comes after Israeli forces recently made their deepest incursion into Lebanon in more than 25 years. The president, meanwhile, telling CNBC he does not care if negotiations with Iran are over, adding he thought the talks were starting to get, quote, very boring. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be on Capitol Hill today for back-to-back hearings with House and Senate committees regarding the State Department's budget requests. This will be Rubio's first time facing lawmakers since the war in Iran began. And a new report from Bloomberg News says Russian officials have grown increasingly concerned about the country's economy amid the stalled invasion of Ukraine. According to that report, Russia's finance ministry and the central bank warned Vladimir Putin war spending is on a, quote, unaffordable path. We are going to sneak in a very brief break. Former First Lady Jill Biden joins us live in the studio next with her memoir titled View from the East Wing. Plus, protests continue outside the Immigration Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey. We will talk with one of the few congressional leaders actually to visit that facility. He'll bring us a report from inside when Morning Joe comes right back. In New Jersey, protesters last night largely complied with the curfew set up near an immigration detention center in Newark after we saw tense scenes play out there over the weekend. On Saturday night, demonstrators clashed with federal officials and counter-protesters. The mayor of Newark instituted a curfew for the area surrounding the facility where protests have been taking place for more than a week amid reports of unsafe and unsanitary conditions inside the detention center. At least 50 people reportedly were arrested on Sunday for violating that curfew. This as Democratic leaders visiting the site publicly call for it to be shut down.
We spoke to several individuals, none of whom has a criminal record, many of whom have been detained here at Delaney Hall for months. That's not America. The fact that there are 18-year-old high school girls being held here is not America. Delaney Hall should be shut down.
Join us now, the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressman Adriano Espaillat of New York. He was one of the Democratic lawmakers who visited Delaney Hall last week. Congressman, great to have you at the table with us.
Thank you.
You are one of the few people who has seen the inside of this detention facility. Other leaders, including the governor, have been kept out. Tell us what you saw there.
Horrible conditions. I met with the women and the men being detained there. Obviously, this is a privately run facility, so the incentive is profit. As a result, we have the women gave me a list of complaints, including an alleged charge of sexual assault by a guard. So I'm really seriously following this up and taking a look at it. Spoiled food, of course, lack of medical services. They have to wait 9 months to go to court and get a habeas corpus. So these are all the complaints that we're getting from an overcrowded facility that should be shut down. And I'm here to support the demands of the people that are being detained.
So, Congressman, I guess the question is, what now? I mean, you've seen the conditions. We've heard about the conditions at other facilities. ICE, the Trump administration, just don't seem to care about your concerns or those of the people being detained there. So what recourse do you have for people outraged by this? What can change it?
Back during the pandemic, we went to Georgia, Irwin, Georgia, and we shut down a prison that was privately run there because of the illegalities that were going on there with regards to medical services for women. So there is a template on what to do. I'm going to introduce legislation that would allow all governors to be able to enter these facilities so that they're the chief executive officers of each state. They should have the ability to go in there and see the conditions. In addition to that, we should start hearings and we should take a deep dive and take a look at the demands and the complaints that detainees, who, by the way, the vast majority of them never committed a crime. They're law-abiding people. that go to work, wind up getting arrested, and are now on their way to be deported and split up from their families. So we want to try. We're going to shut these places down.
So, Congressman, you led me to the question I wanted to ask you. We know you described the terrible conditions in there, but tell us a little bit about the people you found. What sort of lives do they lead? Because the Trump administration came to office saying, well, we're going to detain and deport just the worst of the worst. Is that who you found in that hall?
A total lie. These are working people, mom and dads, that are on their way to work, and many of them in immigration court, as they are complying with their immigration meeting with the judge, are arrested, pulled out of there, and now are facing deportation in Delaney. So these are working people that are being arrested all over the United States, including in Delaney Hall, people from New York City. I met many people from New York City, young people, people with medical conditions, elderly. Everyone is there, and one of the demands by the detainees is to have the young people released, and to have people that have medical conditions also released. So this is a horrible detention center, one that we should be ashamed of, and it should be immediately shut down.
So you're a member of Congress. Congress funds the people who detain these people. Most of the people they're detaining, it seems to me, or as Jonathan just referred to, they are not among the worst of the worst. How can you eliminate their funding quickly and almost immediately?
Through appropriations, and I'm an appropriator, we will push to eliminate them. One of the things that we did in the past few weeks, obviously, was deny funding to DHS. And that included, obviously, the $170 billion plus that was given to DHS, and 75 of which is going to ICE. So we ought to take a look at why are we spending so much money on these detention centers that are holding people that never committed a crime. This is really un-American. Yeah, that's a crime. I would say I would call that a crime, a felony at that.
Chairman of the Hispanic Caucus, Congressman Adriano Espaillat of New York. Jill Biden has made headlines this week ahead of the release of her new memoir titled View from the East Wing, which is out today. In it, Dr. Biden chronicles her tenure as First Lady, balancing her public duties with her personal career. She also offers her candid take and behind-the-scenes details of the turbulent final months of her husband Joe Biden's presidency. And Dr. Jill Biden joins us now. Dr. Biden, good morning. Congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you.
We were just talking about this balance of yours being a teacher, as you have been for most of your life.
40 years.
40 years as a teacher, and how you detail in this book that balance really showing itself in moments like teaching a Zoom class on the eve of your husband's inauguration in January of 2021, and then, of course, insisting on keeping your position even as First Lady. Why was all of that so important to you?
Well, you know, I had to be true to myself. I mean, I worked so hard to get my degrees, and took me 15 years to get 2 masters and a doctorate. And that was my life. That was my passion. That's who I am. And so when we got into the White House, I said, you know, I'm going to continue to teach. And they said, I don't know. Are you sure it's going to be really tough? And I said, I'm going to do it, so you better figure it out.
Were some of your own students surprised to see you still in classrooms?
You know, my students are just so cool. I mean, they just took it in their stride. You know, the first day when they come through and they had to put their book bag through the magnetometer, they were, you know, like, what? What are we doing this for? Because they didn't put my name on the roster. So they were surprised. But after that, it was like, okay, Dr. B. And then from then on, after the first day, I was always Dr. B.
So much to ask you about. You work, of course, out of the East Wing. The title of the book is View from the East Wing.
Yeah, remember that?
Well, I was going to ask you, just reading the title of the book, when you see these images, these photographs of the East Wing thoroughly demolished to make way for a ballroom that the president and some Republicans are now asking taxpayers to fund. When you look at these pictures of the place where you worked and where Rosalind Carter set up her office, what do you think?
You know, I just think we've lost so much institutional memory. I love the East Wing. I love my offices in the East Wing. You know, when you come to visit the White House, that's where you enter, the East Wing. And the excitement that people would feel as they came in to take the picture with their families. And then what I did, I put the artwork of military children down the hallway. and to show what was important to us, to our administration. And then I changed all the older men who were hanging on the wall to first ladies, so that when families went through, they say, oh, there's Hillary, there's Laura. You know, they would recognize the women in the hallway. And I changed the whole tour. I mean, everything was, I'm a teacher. I know that you learn through 5 senses. And so everything was interactive, not just, you know, just a picture on the wall. Because when I got there and I saw kids walking through and then getting on their phone, I thought, no, we can't have that. This is the White House. They should love it. They should know what's in it, why it's there. And because there's just history. There's so much history, and that's what they should learn, because, as you know, we don't have civics in school anymore, and they needed to learn that and to learn to love the history of our nation.
The demolition of the East Wing is kind of a physical manifestation of President Trump tearing down some of the legacy of government, and specifically and tradition of your husband's administration. I'm thinking about, and I want to talk about the president's health in a moment, but about the cancer moonshot and how much money was invested in medical research and mRNA. And now we're hearing, despite some of the pullback and stripping away of money, all these incredible advances that continue to be made in spite of that. What is it like for you and the president to see, and that's just one example, so much of your legacy also being torn down?
You know, it's heartbreaking, because I think Joe's whole mission was to make lives better for the American people. And that was his focus, and that's what he did. And so to see, you know, so many food programs cut, or health programs cut, or, like you're saying, the research, money for research, for women's health, something that I'm really interested in. And it's heartbreaking, a lot of the things that Joe did for the American people.
President Biden was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer that, as you've said, has spread into his bones. How is his health as we sit here today?
Well, you know, cancer is really tough, and I would say he's doing okay. He's still making speeches. He's still on Amtrak a couple times a month, keeping a schedule. But cancer takes its toll. I know every family in America has been touched by cancer. So I think that people can relate to when I say, you know, he gets tired a little more often, but I don't know. It's been tough.
I think some people will be surprised reading the book how early, at least you saw signs that something wasn't right. You say, including in the last year you were in the White House, that he was getting up in the night too many times. He did go in for his physical in February of 2024. Doctor cleared him of that. There's a scene in this book when you and the president later on the beach, and a woman approaches you who's a doctor and said, how did his doctor not catch this? Do you ask yourself that question? Was no one at the time suspicious that he might have cancer in that moment?
Well, I think that the doctors, I mean, I felt that we did have amazing health care in the White House, but somehow this was missed. I think the doctors followed the guidelines and set forth by the American Urological Association, and so they didn't do the PSA, and consequently, we have stage 4 cancer that's in his bones.
And there's certainly many Americans who are wondering, you know, though we know PSAs aren't often administered to men after their early 70s, why would the President of the United States have been an exception to that? The diagnosis came in May of 2025, and considering what the President's health is now, had he continued his re-election bid, had he been elected again, would he have been able to serve as president? Would he have had to resign?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
This, of course, there has been a lot of speculation, Dr. Biden, about the president's, you know, ability to serve that second term. We know what happened, you know, the debate that night in Atlanta in the summer of 2024. You write in the book about how your immediate reaction is you were fearful that something was wrong, that perhaps he even had a stroke. But but publicly, of course, you said that he did well. You cheered him on that evening. What do you say to people who today wonder, if you thought that a medical episode had happened, did you recommend that he go? Did you recommend that he go to a doctor then?
Well, we had a whole team of doctors around us. I mean, I think most Americans may not know that I have a team of doctors around me as First Lady. Joe had a team of doctors around him. So when I saw that, and I was frightened, I was, scared to death to see that. But the doctors were there. And so right after he got off of stage, I mean, let's face it, Joe knew that this was not a good performance. I mean, as we walked off the stage, he whispered to me, Jill, I really, I'll put it nicely, screwed up, didn't I? And I said, yeah, Joe, you did. And so he knew. And then we got off the stage and, I went to get my stuff. He was checked out by the doctors. They said, he's fine. We went on to do 3 more events that night. And Joe was like he always was. And so to me, as I look back, I mean, that was so inexplicable. To this day, it's just inexplicable to me.
So that moment, of course, triggered real debate within the Democratic Party about whether he should continue his candidacy. Nancy Pelosi appeared on our show on July 10th that year, 2024, a couple weeks after the debate. When I asked her if Joe Biden still had her support, she was very coy in her response, saying this.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
At that moment, I reminded her that he had already announced his intention to stay in the race, but she simply repeated her answer, which many Democrats took as a signal that she wanted him.
I saw the show.
That she wanted him to step out. Have you and the president spoken to the former speaker since then?
Oh my gosh. Well, yes. And Joe was just at a dinner in Washington with her, a private dinner. And also we saw her, well, I didn't see her, but Joe did at Tatiana Schlossberg's funeral, Caroline Kennedy's daughter. And, we were in the pew. This is so typical Joe. And I don't know whether you're Catholic or not, but sign of peace. Yeah. And so Joe was at the edge of the pew, and he got up and he went to the back of, I saw him go to the back of the church. I just knew. I mean, you can't be married to somebody for almost 50 years and not know where the heck he was going. And I just knew. He went back to see Nancy. And I found out later, he said, they said, peace, let's be friends. And we got in the car and I said, where did you go? And he told me the story. And I knew she was in the church because I saw the guest list, of course, but I didn't see her personally.
Did you and the president resent, though, the pressure that Nancy Pelosi and President Obama and others put on President Biden to get out?
It was hard. We had the support of the Democratic Party for so long. And, I mean, Joe's been in public service as long as I've known him. And it was hard to go through that.
There were a lot of Democrats even who watched that debate performance and thought in some ways they'd been duped, that close advisors to President Biden, perhaps some members of the media even had protected him enough and kept him out of maybe a rigorous event schedule enough that they could get him along through to Election Day, and they thought, oh, we just saw what it's really like behind the scenes. Is there any truth to that?
Really? If we were hiding him behind the scenes, why did we ask the Trump team for the debate? I mean, we were the ones that proposed it. Like, if that were true, why did we put him out there?
So you don't think that he was protected in any way?
No, I don't think he was protected.
There's another sort of conventional wisdom has formed now in many Democratic circles that President Biden beats Donald Trump in 2020, a moment for history, according to Democrats, for sure, to stop the Trump administration. They overperform in the midterms in 2022, and perhaps that would have been a good moment for President Biden to say, I've done the job. I'm going to be a one-term president at this stage in my life. Were there ever any conversations to that effect?
Well, of course. I mean, Joe had to decide whether to run again. But like you said, we did well. The Democrats did well in the midterms. And in 2023, the Democratic Party was totally behind Joe. And people, everywhere I went, Joe's got to do it again. He's got to run. He's got to run. And he was like, well, I don't know, am I too old? I mean, it was the age question no matter where we went. And so, of course, we heard that what people were saying, but then people were doing polling, who could beat Trump. And the only person who polled that said they could beat Trump was Joe Biden. And so that's why Joe decided to continue on.
Or does the president now regret dropping out of the race?
I would never want anyone I loved to go through that again. It was so painful, not just for us, not just for me and for Joe, but we have children and grandchildren, and to see them have to go through that was really a hard time for our family. And I would never want to put our family through that again.
But does he believe to this day that he would have defeated Donald Trump in that election?
I believe he would have beat Donald Trump in that election.
So, Dr. Biden, when your husband was elected president, he was the oldest man to do so. But then,
he was.
But then Donald Trump.
I was the oldest first lady. My birthday's tomorrow. I hate to admit it.
Really happy early birthday.
Well, thank you.
But then Donald Trump became the oldest man elected president when he in 2024.
Yeah, so
he turns 80 in 2 weeks' time. Your husband, as we've been discussing, received a lot of scrutiny for his age. There were questions about whether he was up for the job. Those questions are starting to mount with President Trump. What do you see? Do you think he deserves that same sort of scrutiny?
I never watched Trump. I'm sorry.
Well, do you think he deserves the same sort of scrutiny that your husband did?
I'm not going to comment anything about Donald Trump.
Let's talk about as the last hours even of your president's time in office, he issued a series of pardons that were very controversial at the time. Do you still stand by those pardons?
Absolutely.
And do you feel like they've given a template for perhaps this president to do the same?
Oh, I'm not going to speculate about what this current president is going to do. Look, Joe said all along, I am not going to pardon my son. Yeah. He stood by that. And then this current president was elected. And he vowed retribution against our son. So I don't think the process was fair to our son, Hunter. And then when Trump got into office, he said what he was going to do. I want to put that Hunter Biden in jail. We couldn't let that happen, especially on the charge that he was accused of. So I stand by the pardon. Yeah. When Joe came to me and said, I'm going to pardon Hunter, of course I was for that. I'm Hunter's mother. Of course.
Vice President Harris put out a book last year in which she said the race should not have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition, talking about your husband. What's your reaction to that? And have the president and his vice president spoken about any of this?
Oh my gosh, she just called 2 days ago. I heard Joe on the phone like, hi, Kamala. That he was watching TV in the other room. And
were you surprised she wrote that?
Well, I guess I was a little surprised that she wrote that. I thought we were a great, Joe and Kamala, me, Doug, I thought we were a great team. We chose Kamala, or Joe chose Kamala to be VP, and so we were supportive of her. And look, when Joe got out, he handed over the reins to Kamala. He had full confidence in her. I went out on the road a lot for Kamala. And honestly, I truly believed she was going to win. I mean, when I got up the next morning after election night and I went in, I was feeding Willow, and my phone rang. Did you see the news? And I'm like, what news? And they said, Kamala lost. I ran into the bedroom and I woke up Joe and I said, Joe, why didn't you wake me up? I mean, I was shocked. I think a lot of Americans were shocked. And so.
How do you account for the loss? Because I think a lot of Democrats felt the way you did. Why did Donald Trump win again?
I don't know. You have to ask other Americans that because I truly don't know.
In our remaining moment with you, you do write quite a bit about hope in this book. You talk about the nurses that you've watched.
Oh, and the teachers.
And these times can feel very heavy. They can feel dark for a lot of people. I always tell my kids there's a lot more light than dark in the world. I promise that's true.
I love that.
And why do you feel that way? Because I think people feel like, boy, how do we get out of this moment we're in
We'll get
right
out
now?
of it because we're Americans. We're resilient. You know, we've been through tough stuff before. Maybe not some of this craziness, you know, now, but we're tough. We're tough, and we are optimistic, and we are hopeful. And when people come up to me, which they do all the time, and tell me, I lost my job, you know, this happened to me, I lost my health care, whatever. And I say to them, don't lose hope. Find whatever don't just complain, do something about it. You know, register people to vote, go out and serve food at a food bank. You know, support a candidate that believes what you believe. Don't be complacent. Act. Find your passion and act. And so that's what gives me hope. And I see young people now that are, you know, joining the campaigns as the season is heating up again. And so, you know, I'm a teacher. I have to believe in optimism and hope and believe in the young people of this nation, because this is left to them. They've got to make it.
The new book, titled View from the East Wing, is out now. Author, former First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, thank you very much, and please give our best to President Biden.
Oh, I will. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me.
Coming up, we'll go through the new action. The Department of Defense barring journalists from accessing its press office by designating the space as classified. The Pentagon's acting press secretary issued a statement that the office is now considered a, quote, sensitive, compartmented information facility, pointing to speechwriters who handle classified material using that space. The move comes amid a months-long legal battle over whether journalists should have unescorted access when visiting unclassified areas of the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth imposed restrictions on the press last year, and this past March, the Pentagon closed the Correspondence Corridor. That's an open workspace reporters previously were allowed to access. So there's effectively nowhere to go anymore at the Pentagon if you're a reporter covering the Defense Department, John. And this, calling the press office now a SCIF, is a new invention.
And it's an outrage. It is an invention. And it's not a SCIF, it's a work spot. It's a workplace where Pentagon reporters have worked in that building for decades with some freedom of movement. Of course, there are parts of the building they can't access, as there should be, just as there is at the White House. The reporters at the White House, we can't see all of it, but we have room to there. And this is a continued effort by this Secretary of Defense to push the press out of the building. They kicked out the longtime press corps in these briefings, and he hasn't had one in a while, but when he does have a briefing, he picks on conservative outlets he knows he'll get friendly questions from. And this is another effort to restrict reporters from doing their jobs. A number of news organizations, with the New York Times leading the charge, to their credit, have filed lawsuits to try to stop it.
Also this morning, President Trump has issued what he calls a complete and total endorsement of Congressman Tom Kean Jr. of New Jersey, despite the Republican lawmaker being absent from Capitol Hill for nearly 3 months. In a Truth Social post, the president said, Kean will never let you down. However, he's not been seen in Congress since voting on March 5th, with fellow New Jersey Republicans describing his absence as radio silence. Strange story. Last month, Kean revealed he's been battling an unspecified illness and says doctors do expect a full recovery. Kean, who's running unopposed in tonight's primary, thanked Trump for the endorsement on social media. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he expects Kean back soon, but admits even he doesn't know the details of his condition. And New York City's youngest Knicks fans now have official permission to stay up late for the NBA Finals. Mayor Zohran Mamdani signed an executive order yesterday repealing bedtimes for the city's school children so they can stay up to watch every minute of this series.
Who's ready to watch the Knicks? Me! Here is our mayor's order repealing kids' bedtimes for the Knicks Finals run. All right, here we go. We're signing it.
I don't know.
Okay, my friends. Executive order is signed. Bedtime is repealed.
After the signing, children gathered at City Hall to add their handprints to the order. Game 1 is tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. with with much of the series falling on school nights. John, that's just good politics.
Yeah, Mayor Mamdani said that in this job he faces many difficult decisions. This was not one of them. This is very clever photo op. He's a legit diehard Knicks fan. My question is, can we get him to sign an executive order to get our show to start later, so that in the morning, so therefore we have a chance to stay up to watch the games?
He's got jurisdiction, right? We're New York
right
based.
here.
7 o'clock. Should we start at 7 this week?
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
All right, we'll talk to him.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, coming up, from luxury real estate to Oreos to being famous.
Mike, careful.
It's all now for a new edition of Brand Up, Brand Down. Joining us now, the host of On Brand with Donnie Deutsch, the great Donnie Deutsch. Donnie, good morning.
Good to see you, gentlemen.
You got a nice, healthy list here.
Yeah, very robust.
Let's get right into it. It's very robust. Our first topic, Brand Up, New York City luxury real estate. We're just talking about how rich guys were so worried about Mayor Mamdani. Things seem to be going pretty well.
Yeah, I'm not a Mamdani fan, but as Pierre the Terre tax, I think, is a good idea. Everybody thought that all rich people are going to leave the city. No, actually, sales of $10 million plus apartments are up 80% in the last month. Sales of $10 million plus apartments are up 10%. Basically flat office tax, and people are not leaving the city. I mean, this is one. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, everybody's going to leave." Nobody's leaving.
So, Donnie, let's go to the next one. It's a brand down and, frankly, a scary one. AI voice cloning scams.
This is really important for anybody. There was $1 billion built by AI voice scams. Somebody can go on TikTok or Instagram, take 3 seconds of your voice, and through something called voice skinning, talk into the phone, and it translates into that real person's voice, so you sound like you're listening to a kid. You should have a safe word with your kid in case somebody calls and says, "I'm in distress, I need this, I need money," because it's really stunning, and it's really frightening, actually.
Yeah, that's not good.
What is Brand Up Oreo plus the boys band BTS? What is that all?
Do you even know what the boys band BTS is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
but I mean-
BTS is a huge K-pop band. They had been missing because they were serving in the military there. They're back, and Oreos in 80 countries is doing a collaboration. The wafers are purple. There are 13 different cookies with insignias of the boy band's names. The filling is something called Hotek. It's Korean pancake street food. I don't know if it's for this table, but you get a light stick and 3 cookies and certain things. So you might want to think about that.
Sounds good. I just love that Barnacle drew that one.
Yeah.
BTS and Oreos. Love it.
He's a big K-pop guy.
Spencer Pratt earlier.
Yeah. Brand down neighborhood traditions.
Yeah, Mike, you've talked a lot about this, about neighborhoods. You know, 1 in 4 young people basically say they have nothing to do with their neighbors. I mean, that's down in half since the early 2000s. You don't see those images anymore of people talking to their neighbors, of celebrating occasions together. A lot of this has to do with technology. I thought that was a really sad one.
They don't even know their neighbors.
They don't even know their neighbors, yeah. And this has to, you don't even, in the media, you don't see the images of neighborhood gatherings anymore. It's a thing of the past.
We need it back, though.
Yeah,
Block parties, Halloween, all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Brand Up, 2 beers and a puppy. What are we talking about here?
This is Brand Up for 2 beers and a puppy. Psychologists have done, there's a great question that is a tell about people. Do you want to have 2 beers with them, and would you trust them watching your puppy for a weekend? If both is yes, that's a positive. But I teach my kids, though, you don't get all things from all people. You can have a friend that maybe you want to have a beer with. You wouldn't trust your puppy. On the other hand, you can have somebody who's very, very boring. You don't want to have a beer with them, but you would trust them with their puppy. It's an interesting psychological tell.
How do you handle this one? Brand down, being famous? You're famous.
Not really, but this is really counterintuitive also, that only 9% of Gen Zers want to be famous. You thought with the influencer culture and everything, and that's down dramatically, where 50% in the early 2000s, under the age of 16, because of watching reality shows, wanted to be famous. They've seen so many people crash or burn in these reality shows, and the postmortems are not good. So being famous is... Just because people want to participate with influencers doesn't mean they want to be influencers or be famous.
Donnie, I won't ask what you're wearing, but the next one is Brand Up, the clothing line from The Gap.
Yeah, The Gap is back in a big way. They've had 10 positive quarters. Their sales are up. It all has to do with their designer, Zach Posen. He's a big celebrity wrangler, for lack of a better word. Demi Moore, Gwyneth Paltrow, Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway and Gwyneth have been in ads. That's new hot thing called Gap Studio. It just shows how brands can have different life cycles. Gap was dead for years. They're back.
This next one is us. Brand down, being sleep. 8 hours of sleep.
8 hours of sleep.
No chance.
How much sleep do you get?
6.
Yeah,
probably.
They say anything less than 6 or more than 8 is not good. It's 6.3 to 7.8 is the right sweet spot for sleep. Getting too much sleep, more than 9 hours, it doesn't mean it's going to make you less healthy. It's a sign that you're not healthy. Anything less is not healthy. So, and interestingly enough, men need another 6 minutes a night of sleep, 6 minutes less than sleep than a woman a night.
6 minutes.
Another reason for the Mamdani extension on our show. All right, Brand Up. Drake That album, as the father of two teenagers, it's all the talk.
He's got his new #1 hit. It's his 13th #1 single. He passed Michael Jackson for the most pop singles by a male artist. The only two artists that have more are the Beatles and Mariah Carey. The two women artists he's tied with now are Taylor Swift and Rihanna. And Drake is hot as a pistol.
He lost that Kendrick Lamar feud, it seems, but a big-time comeback. Next one, Brand Down. I'm surprised by this. Brand Down, Texas barbecue joints. Why?
Yeah, well, it has to do with beef prices. Beef is $6.70 a pound. Brisket, which is kind of a cornerstone of all barbecue, you basically, because you trim off so much fat and so much stuff, you have to pay $10 a pound, which means you have to charge $40 a pound, which the average barbecue for two is $70 to $100. They're really struggling, and that's a we took so much on the show about affordability. Its tentacles reach so many different
places
directions.
that have been there for generations and generations. Small mom and pop shops. Unfortunately, Donna, we have to skip over Brotox and Tan Maxing.
Well, that was Mike's.
We can do a web exclusive on that one and tape it afterward. Let's finish with Brand Up. Positive attitude.
Yeah, positive attitude. They say is healthy. It has to do with.
He says with a smile.
You want to do the Brotox, don't you?
He did. He wanted the Brotox.
Just
give him a little Brotox.
A little Brotox. Men it's surging through the roof. You know the number 3 procedures are filler, Botox, and hair replacements are up by 50%.
Yeah,
there's new technology, so that's good news. I don't think Joe needs it. I don't think you need it. I don't think you need it. I don't think I need it, Mike. Good news for you.
And the positive attitude?
Positive attitude, better for health. They show that it's really that stress, all that stress is not healthy. It affects a lot of 23.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب الذي أجاءنا هدى يا رب بالنور أكرم مهجتي واغفر ذنوبي وهون كربتي أنت الرجاء إذا ضاقت بنا الدنيا وبذكرك العالي تحيا روحنا الله الله يا مولانا أنت الرحيم وأنت هادينا الله الله يا رحمن بنورك اجعل قلوبنا إيمان صلوا على طه الرسول محمد خير البرية والنور المؤيد من بالصلاة عليه نال راحة والقلب من أنواره يتجدد يا ربنا اجعلنا على درب الهدى واختم بالخيرات أعمارنا مدى مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب المصطفى